Today, I'm privileged to be sitting down with Superintendent Jerry Almendarez, who recently retired from the leadership of Santa Ana Unified School District, a district of 36,000 students in Orange County, California, and is now leading Creative Futures Collaborative, a consultancy supporting education leaders on strategy, leadership, and the integration of AI. Jerry, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I look forward to our conversation.
There was a recent report from Brookings that posits that we're on the wrong path with AI and our pell-mell adoption and rollout. But the report was far from like anti-AI.
Yeah.
It instead points to taking a more disciplined approach that works to ensure student safety and alignment with education goals. I know from your work on student competencies and graduate profiles that you've long been a strategic and systems focused superintendent. In the area of AI, how can leaders balance kind of this careful strategic thinking with like speed and urgency, which I know they feel pressure to move forward?
Yeah, I would caution them on the speed part and more on the slowing down and being a lot more tactical in their approach. I think a lot of people feel like they have to go out and purchase these platforms or purchase programs, and then identify themselves as AI ready district. And it's much, much more than that. It's critical that the leaders of the districts and the systems understand the platforms. And then the way we did it in Santa Ana was a slow trickle out. So we looked for volunteers, asked them that anybody who was interested in learning more about these platforms to raise their hand, and then we would give them access to it. And then in about a 6 week period, pull everybody back in and kind of reassess the value of the platforms that they're using, how they're using them, what are they using them for, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and then continue that feedback cycle over and over again.
Are you kind of scaling as you're going then?
We were,
Is it a pilot and then scale?
yeah, we were piloting and scaling. And so what we did is we asked for volunteers, and we actually started with executive cabinet. And I had a 7 member cabinet, and even out of the 7 members, 3 were the early adopters. And that was my ed service team and my human resources department. And so they said, you know what, we'll give it a shot. We'll look at the platforms and see how they can help. And it started out very simple, responding to emails and some personal experiments like recipes and travel plans and stuff like that. But the more the executive cabinet started to understand the platforms and how they can be used, the more they were eager to get it out into their executive directors' hands. And so after about 4 months of talking about the platforms in executive cabinet, because they were new at the time, we started in 2021. And we would watch YouTube videos, we would watch TikTok videos, see how the people that were using it when the platform started to emerge, what they were using them for, and then kind of relating that to, okay, how can this help us in education? And so we got to the point where our executive assistant superintendent says, you know what, this could be a very powerful tool in the hands of teachers. Can we get it to our executive directors, which are the ones that do the staff development? So we had about 15 executive directors, and we did the same process. We asked if there were any volunteers that were interested in learning the platforms. Out of 15, maybe 3, 4 raised their hands. We said, okay, which platforms do you want to use? We'll open them up. We'll purchase a subscription for you. And then you guys come back and tell us, how it's going. And once we got it into their hands very quickly, within a 3 week period, they came back to executive cabinet and says, oh my God, we got to put this in our staff developers' hands. And so we followed that same cycle. We went out to the teachers that were on assignment and asked them if anybody was interested in learning the platforms. Out of the 30, maybe 5 said yes. And so as the 5 were going through the trainings and learning how to use the platforms, their colleagues started to say, what are you doing? How'd you do that? I want to do that. Can I do that? And so that's when we slowly started to open up the platforms in a trickle out method to our staff developers. And then they took it to the teachers in the teacher training, and they had the same questions. Any teachers interested in learning the platforms? If you are, raise your hand, and we'll see if we can get you access. So that's when we started to roll it out into the classroom. But we started with adults and only gave access to the adults in this. And we laid the ground rules saying, hey, no private personal information. We don't know enough about this, the data where it's going yet. So we don't want any confidential or any personal information in there. And they understood and they took it and ran with it. And finally, it got to the point where our staff developers came back to us and said, Mr. Almendarez, we have to slow down because more and more people are using it. We have teachers going out there um, subscribing to free subscriptions. We don't even know what they're using or if it's meeting the data compliance, the compliance policy. So we immediately put a pause, brought in some facilitators, and spent 4 months with a group of individuals from the district talking about the guardrails AI guidance that we created. And so when we spent 4 months working on that, we created that, and then we were able to open up the floodgates to our classroom teachers. And
Wow.
that's where it kind of took off.
Yeah, so you were clearly on the cutting edge. It does sound like you really came up with a way of advancing this work that was urgent but thoughtful. And I like the fact that you're not it's not as simple as just piloting. What I really feel like you're doing, and but particularly by soliciting volunteers, is you're doing two things. You're generating buy-in, and
Yeah.
you're reducing the chance that you're going to be fighting buy-in because you're inviting people in. And it also seems you pretty systemically went from senior leadership to mid-level leadership, from mid-level leadership to those that are interacting directly with teachers to teachers to so it I can see how that could really lead to good buy-in and an adoption in a non-threatening and non-risky way.
You know, and we had pushback because there were times during that period when it first emerged where there were states and districts banning the platforms, right? And so we just happened to be in a district where the culture was more forward thinking and a board that was very supportive and a superintendent that was close to the end of his career. So if something went wrong, it was going to be okay. So I was able to take a little bit more risks than maybe somebody else newer to the superintendency. But we did loop in our community. We felt that if the community is going to resist, then we wanted to know early on rather than after full implementation, right? So
Hmm.
at the same time we started to engage our teachers and our staff developers, we were engaging parents as well. As a matter of fact, it was the teachers on assignment that came to us and said, "Hey, can we include the parents too?" And we said, "Absolutely." And so we held a parent AI information night. It was packed. We didn't know what to expect. I was nervous, like a nervous father, that whole day, and I did not attend the meeting because I didn't know what was going to happen. Not that I was afraid, but I just thought, if there's going to be venting and resistance, they need to have the freedom to do it and not feel pressured by me and my presence in the room. So I stayed away. And then after the meeting was over, I got a call with excitement in the voices of the staff developers saying, "Hey, it went great. Not only did it go great, but the parents are asking for another session." So then we started to loop in more sessions to update. And then we added our community, our business leaders into this and said, "Hey, here's a new innovation, new technology. Here's how we're using it as adults. Here's how we're using it with kids. We just want you guys to know, what we're doing and how we're doing it." So, and again, if there was any pushback, they would definitely be the ones to let us know. So that's how we rolled it out. But I've been a superintendent for 15 years. I made a lot of mistakes in those 15 years. Early on in my career, I was fortunate enough to learn from those mistakes. So I took those lessons learned and applied it to the rollout of AI when it started to emerge in education.
So you were saying about how those first steps are kind of hard. So for leaders out there today that are making their first steps, are there areas of that AI can be utilized in the education system that you would recommend they front load the ones that are maybe either more urgent and necessary to do, or that are just showing just such clear promise, unambiguous promise, if you will, as opposed to things that are arguable either way? Are there areas that you'd recommend they prioritize looking into?
Every district it's unique. It's like students and their uniqueness and their learning styles, right? So even in my district in Orange County, the conversation I was able to have in Santa Ana is completely different than my neighboring district like Tustin or Irvine. the communities and the cultures of the communities are just in different places, right? So I was able to move quickly, I think because we messaged it as an opportunity to break the equity barrier. So in Santa Ana, we're high blue collar district, high socioeconomically disadvantaged community, and our charge was like this can break down the equity barrier and give us an opportunity to be competitive with our surrounding districts. So our messaging was this is an innovative tool that may change, academic achievement within the district. And so it was a little bit more easier for our community, our labor groups to embrace it with that understanding than maybe a higher performing district that says, no, we don't need to do this. We're already high performing. So my recommendation to superintendents is they need to learn the platforms. Pick a platform and start using it. Start to engage it. Start to use it for simple things like everybody does, responding to emails, um, then evolve into can it help create an agenda? Can it help develop a strategic plan? I want it to serve as a thought partner. Just the evolution of how you use the platforms is going to increase the more you use it. If you're just using it to write emails, then it's going to be an expensive email responder, right? But if you're using it to give yourself superpowers as a superintendent, that helps you push back on maybe some challenging conversations at the executive cabinet level, or helps you get information to board members that maybe you weren't thinking about because you were using these platforms as a thought partner to help you think of things that you were not thinking about. Well, then you're going to find some really positive value out of that.
Excellent. So I hear one message out of that. Like many things with education, there are no blanket rules that apply to all districts. What's really important is that you look at your own context and make the decisions that are right for that context.
Yeah. The important thing is, in my experience, it's got to start with the leaders of the district. I'll give you an example. So, as I mentioned, that executive cabinet was beginning to explore and experiment with these platforms. At one executive cabinet meeting, we were having a conversation about in California, each school site has to develop a site SIPSA, which is a school improvement plan, right? For that particular school site. Well, we had been engaging the platforms long enough. My ed service team came back and said, Mr. Almendarez, can we create a GPT that sees whether these site SIPSs are aligned with the district priorities? And we said, yes, go ahead and do it. So we had 47 schools. Out of the 47, we took 20. They loaded it up into this alignment GPT. Out of the 20, it kicked four back as non-aligned. So we pulled those four school sites. We looked at the documents and realized that the only thing that was different between the plan that was ready to be board approved and the previous plans was the date and the year was changed. Everything else was the same. So we pulled those administrators in, had conversations. We didn't want it to be punitive because, we were using this for the first time. There had been unique situations. They didn't have APs. They were brand new administrators. A lot of things came into play, but it was our way to reassure our leadership team that they have to trust us. This is not going to be a technology that's going to be used against you. So we did not discipline. It wasn't a disciplinary conversation. It was a, hey, look, here's what happened. Don't worry about telling us why. Just we understand there are a lot of things going on. Just go back and fix it. And so they came back and fixed it. And two things happened out of that conversation. One is after the principals left, the executive cabinet members were reflecting, in silence there. And one of them said, I've been in this district for 30 years. I wonder how many site SIPSs where it's only been the date and the year changed have we, not been able to catch. And then the other one was the very next principal meeting our principals are walking into the room and there's just a different sense about their spirits when they walk in, right? They're a little bit stoic and you could tell they weren't themselves. So they all come into the room. We close the door, sit down, and then one of the superintendents raises his hand and says, Mr. Almendarez, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. He goes, You guys are using AI to check whether our site SIPSs are aligned. Can we use AI to write our site SIPSs? And my response was, yeah. And so from that point, it was a pivotal turning point because you could see the anxiety go out of the room, smiles back on their faces, and the willingness and the excitement about, okay, show me how to do this. And so that we got through that meeting, but the next meeting, the principal says, hey, we need Ed Services to come in here and show us how to use the technology so we can write our site SIPSs. And we did. And so, that was a but it's important for the superintendents and the district teams to model the use of these platforms. And because it gets those people that may be on the fence or may not be interested, that are directly impacting kids, like teachers and principals, to begin to say, I need to learn this technology's innovation because it's important for my kids to have experiences that are relevant to the future workforce.
Excellent. Um, you'd referred earlier to your time in Santa Ana and that you originally pitched this to the community as a potential way of addressing equity issues. Now, obviously, with AI, equity often appears on the other side of the ledger. Do students have access to the technology that's required? Was the GPT itself trained on equitable data and information? Um, Tell me more about the positive side of the ledger and how you see AI helping to address equity issues.
So for us, it's a generation. It can impact generations positively for decades. Historically, Santa Ana Unified was below was below average when it came to academic achievement in the county. We were one of the lowest districts in the county. But not that we weren't working hard, our teachers were working hard. We had before and after school amazing programs, but it just felt like no movement was being made. So when COVID hit, we had time to reflect. We met with our community. That's when we worked on our graduate profile and had this robust conversation about what our expectations were for kids when they left us. At the same time, OpenAI released ChatGPT. And so you have these two parallel experiences. One is through the lens of what the future workforce is going to look like and what our expectations are of our graduates. And two is this unique technology that seems to be taking on a life of its own that didn't exist before. And so our charge was how can we leverage this innovation to help break down the barriers, the equity barriers in our classrooms. And so we approached it through uh, engaging the adults in the system to learn more about the platforms so we can roll it out safely to the kids in the classrooms. And that's why it took us a good 2.5 years to really feel comfortable before we actually open it up and put it in students' hands.
Excellent. Um, So, in addition to being a strategic leader, I understand you're also a bit of a futurist, considering possible scenarios that could unfold. I'm wondering, as you look forward into the next 5 to 10 years of K-12 public education, there's a lot of different ways things could go. They could go badly for K-12 and vis-a-vis charter schools and other competition, or it might totally revitalize. Tell me about your fears of how it could go wrong. What do we need to do to make it go right?
Well, I think competition is good. I mean, there are good charter schools, there are bad charter schools, there are good public schools, there are bad public schools. But I think competition is good. I think the education, the way we are used to it, is going to be non-existent in the next 5 to 10 years. Questions that we were asking ourselves on this journey was things like, why does school have to be 5 days a week in a brick and mortar? Can it be 3 days in a brick and mortar and 2 days out in the community learning and engaging in other activities that build the capacity of our students, give them experiences, maybe work related or just experimental, depending on the grade level. The other questions that we had is why does school have to start at 8 and end at 3? Can there be flexible scheduling? Can we have an AM session and a PM session? One, to help those families where they need childcare, and two, the teachers, also who have young families that may benefit as well, since the work is a lot easier now with the remote ability that we have that we didn't have before. And so those are some of the things that we were looking at. We were looking at the online and virtual experiences as well, because not everybody learns in a classroom face to face. Other learners are more independent and can excel with that independence and the support from home. So we were just looking at flipping and disrupting the K-12 system as it exists. And you're seeing pockets of that across the country. And then now what's happening with the federal legislation, less oversight, who knows what impact that will have on the local districts.
So ironically, it seems like the best way of preserving K-12 education is to actually be creative and not try to preserve the old paradigms, but to question everything and look at what needs to be adjusted going forward.
Exactly. And, I mean, it's not about knowledge and memorization anymore. It's about actually demonstrating the competencies. And, I would much rather have a student leave us who can demonstrate their ability and their skills than just take a test on a piece of paper and get an A. And I think those experiences we have to let go. Grades have to look differently as well. That was another thing that we were looking at, is redoing our grading systems and making them more coherent, because if you have three high schools and three algebra teams with three different grading criterias, then how are you going to measure whether what they're doing is working or not working? And so those are serious conversations that we have to have when the time is right. And now, we have superintendents. I was on a call today earlier with a superintendent who wanted to know more about embracing the innovation at the leadership level, because they're looking at the potential budget cuts that are coming, in the next couple of years, and what impact it's going to have on them. He was a smaller district, so he's looking at how can I not fire people, but how can we repurpose these individuals into harder to find positions, and you embrace the innovation to help us with the routine tasks. And so those are things that superintendents are going to have to start thinking about, is, do I need to hire a person for this position, or can I automate this position? Can the innovation help do that? And then I can take that person and retrain them to be instructional aides or a special ed teacher, stuff like that.
Yeah. I think right now it's funny. I feel like systems are simultaneously worried about AI taking jobs and teachers' roles, but the reality is there's not enough teachers in many places already, and not enough budget for the amount of teachers that you wish you had.
Right.
So to the degree that you can use this new technology to free up teachers for their core work, I think it's just an efficiency
Well,
uh,
well,
and route to success.
that's the other leverage point that we had when we were beginning this journey, is we did the graduate profile. We made the mistake of not including kids in this conversation, right? So one of my meetings, a principal raised her hand and she goes, "Mr. Almendarez, you're asking us to design a system for kids, but look around the room, there are no kids in the room." So, after that painful question and difficult reflection, we ended up pausing the rollout of our graduate profile and did a student listening session. And thank God we did, because it was the best thing that we ever did. After I want to say 60 schools, 600 students, not 60 schools, 600 student interviews. It was in person, face-to-face interviews.
Wow.
And we got the data, and we were completely in the wrong direction that the kids were asking to be, right? We were we were creating systems for kids and experiences for kids, and the kids were like, "I could care less about systems and what you're creating until I know that the teachers care, the adults care about me. I can care less about the lessons." Matter of fact, that's what one senior said. He goes, "Mr. Ondarez, a teacher could have the best lesson in the world, but if I know if that teacher doesn't care, then I can care less about the lesson." Kindergartner raised his hand and says, "I don't learn well sitting down for 6 hours." A middle school young lady said, I just wish a teacher would pronounce my name correctly because when she doesn't, she takes my identity away. A freshman in high school says, I don't even bother going to my algebra class because the teacher gives me a hard time before I even sit down based on the way I look. And so for the kids, it was all about connection and it was all about engagement, making learning meaningful and fun. That's not the system that we were talking about when we were getting ready to roll it out. So we took all of that data back, shared it with our principals, shared it with the teachers, the staff developers, and said, okay, our kids want this. Let's have a conversation about what that looks like and how are we going to use AI to help get us there. And we ended up bringing in the Institute for the Future out of Palo Alto. And they're the ones that helped us reimagine leading, teaching, and learning through the framework of strategic foresight, which is it's a different way of strategic planning through different lenses, not your experience, not your past experiences, but it challenges you to look at signals out in society, whether it's in your own city, your own district, or across the country or the globe. But look for signals and then begin to make sense out of these signals and then create scenarios that are directions that you would like to be in as a district. One being the worst case, the best case, and then a bunch in between. And so that was the journey that we were on. And we actually created a plan that was a future of learning plan in Santa Ana, and that document is on my LinkedIn feed as well. So
Excellent. One theme I'm hearing from this is that looking at AI in isolation is and implementing it and leading it in isolation is almost impossible to do successfully. You need to wrap it in with all the other good leadership practices. The leadership in your district around the graduate profile and having a target that you know what the students want to reach, and then you asking how can we utilize AI,
yeah,
engaging your community and making sure that and your both your business community and your parent community, and equally vital, engaging your students in the process.
yeah.
These are good leadership practices, not good technology practices, but they clearly carry over to this adoption of new technology.
Yeah. We were in the process of rewriting our vision and mission statement in Santa Ana, right? So we got a group of parents, community stakeholders, and some students representing the sites. And part of the requirement was, and our administrators were already using the platforms, but as we gave them questions and talking points for table facilitation, the kids were using ChatGPT to make a statement that they had agreed upon as a team to make it more robust and more, come alive. And so our kids and our teams at that point were not bashful or shy about saying, here's what AI said. And then people would hear it and they're like, dang, that's good. Yeah, that represents the way I feel. And so we ended up writing a mission and vision, not with the entire use of AI, but AI was like a calculator. It was a tool. It was like a computer to help us be better thinkers. That was it. Give us superpowers.
So, speaking about our leaders, you've already touched on this a little bit, but I just want to make a distinction here. Like, I feel like all education leaders right now are trying to get a handle on AI policy and its application in existing areas of education, like from curriculum to scheduling, et cetera. Obviously, the role of the superintendent and any district leader is a little bit different. That's not all they do. So not beyond curriculum and assessment, there's communication with staff and the public, labor relations and negotiation, strategic planning, vision setting, professional development, staying on top of research. When you think about the superintendent themselves sitting there in front of their computer with their ChatGPT open, how can they use and their team for that matter use AI? So looking beyond like curriculum and assessment, but just their direct role in leading and driving that district forward. What are the areas that you think AI can play the biggest and most effective role?
First, I'll say that the focus for a lot of superintendents is always the kids in the classroom and the teachers, right? Which is important. It's a valid one. But they also need to reflect on the importance of them learning the platforms and them learning how to use it to help them become better leaders. And so some of the ways that we used it in Santa Ana was with negotiations. We created a project, and the platforms evolved over time. So there were not projects features when we started to engage. There wasn't even GPTs when we started to engage. It was strictly chats, right? But because we had used it and because the platforms were evolving, every time there was a new feature, somebody in cabinet would come in and say, "Hey, did you see this new feature? Let me show you what I did." So over time, we created the GPTs. Over time, we created projects. And a particular project that we had, knowing that we were getting ready for a layoff of about 280 teachers, we knew that it would be in our best interest to actually create a project that would house all of our information and data that could help us respond to board questions or community questions. And so we created this project in addition to a GPT that was specifically on labor relations and budgeting. And we're able to tap into that on a number of occasions, taking thought exchange, frequently asked questions from our community, taking that database, loading it up into the project or GPT and asking it to respond based on the knowledge that we had uploaded, like previous board presentations or any legislation or board policies or labor agreements that were already finalized to show the public, here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it. Then you take the same project and the same GPT and the same output and say, okay, now give me talking points for my Board of Education. Give me an email that I can send to my site principals to let them know what's going to happen at the next board meeting and to give them talking points in case their teachers or their community comes to them. So that's the evolution of how we used it. And labor was just one way. Then we created a GPT and a project for our Board of Education. So we literally created a virtual board that we would run, take our agendas that we were preparing for the next board meeting, run them through this GPT and ask it to identify any controversial items on the agenda and which board members may be asking those questions. And we take those questions. Each division would go back to their teams and say, okay, give me the answers to these questions. And you'd hear, well, when did they ask this question? They didn't. This is our GPT doing predictive analytics based on the knowledge that we uploaded that says, the probability of this board member asking this question based on their voting patterns or based on their previous YouTube transcribed uploads, this board member is most likely going to ask this question. And so we would take the answers to those questions and then put the answers in our Friday updates before the actual board meeting happened in the hopes that it would diffuse any potential public, questioning or anything like that. But then superintendents can also use it as they develop their master calendar, their governance calendar. You have board meetings already scheduled. You have budget presentations already scheduled. You have specific hiring deadlines you have scheduled. You can upload all of this into either platform, and then you can ask it to backwards map strategies and ways to prepare for this. When to send out letters to principals, giving them enough time to do an assessment of their school site to see what their staffing ratios look like. So it's just unlimited. You can use it for communications. We use it for communications a lot and human resources and developing interview questions, stuff like that. So it's really unlimited. Anything you can think of, you can create support in one of these platforms.
Excellent. That was great stuff. Well, Jerry, thank you for your time and your insights. For those looking for help on AI adoption, I encourage you to reach out to Creative Futures Collaborative. As always, please visit aiedward.org for the latest news and resources on AI in education. And as always, thank you for learning alongside us.